Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Amy Jordan, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
If this is your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity. Episode 226, featuring a conversation with Amy Jordan. And Amy is actually the neighbor of another recent guest, Gina Moffa. So Gina connected us, thought that Amy would be a great fit for the show. And we had a nice conversation, so I hope you enjoy it. Here you go, Amy Jordan.
Emerge from slumber.
I think the story that I want to tell is that we can be victorious. You know, our obstacles create our pathway, and we're all existing in this state now of global trauma. I refer to it with everything in the world and the inundation of information, and I got caught up in it last night, compare and despair, and you know, we're all challenging on so many levels. So I feel like my personal, multiple life and death, lost my sight, have had to revamp my life on multiple occasions is coming in handy right now in terms of supporting people to be victorious within the challenges, you know, because they're going to continue. And how do we become happy and create value as you are? Resilience in a nutshell. You know, you don't have to get crushed by a bus. You know, I got run over by a bus in 2009. They wanted to amputate my leg. I was a dancer. You don't have to go through all that to like rebuild your life. But, you know, where do we go from here? And how do we stay, as Chita Rivera says, you know, stay in my lane, stay in your lane. What is my mission? For us trauma survivors, I think it's, you know, learning self-care, learning boundaries.
You know, one of the conclusions I came to not all that long ago, I journal a lot, and I love that practice because I reach conclusions that I would not otherwise have reached.
Yeah.
And I realized and articulated that there's a part of me that longs for a sense of triumph.
Yes.
To feel like I've overcome everything, you know? And I want that for myself. I do. And I want to explore what that means for me. And I know some of the things that means. And the irony is probably that I already have, in a lot of ways, triumphed, right? But as I pointed out to a friend of mine recently, when we evaluate ourselves, we're always thinking about what we haven't done rather than what we have done. You know, I'm pretty hard on myself. So I have to sometimes be intentional to think about what I have done and what good I have brought into the world, you know?
I was having that very conversation with a friend earlier today. She said almost verbatim what you said. I'm just in a constant state of frustration. And I think it's, for me, part of always since I was a child being up against, fear of death with having a chronic condition and then losing my sight. And so I'm always aware of this sense of having to get things done now. But I'm 54 and I was reminded today, you've done a lot, but I haven't had this happen and I haven't had that happen and I'm this thing and no one's getting back. And she was like, my friend said, take it down a notch. Let's look at what you have created. And, you have a book, you have a movie, you've put the dance company together, you're teaching fitness, you maintain your health and wellness. Like, she made a list of all these things that I don't recognize as regular accomplishments. And it made me go, just to go and have some fun. Your job is to go have some fun, but I have to work. I haven't done this and I haven't done that and I haven't heard from this person. She's like, Amy, I want to hear what you did for fun. I'm going to call you tomorrow.
So what are you going to do for fun tonight?
I'm probably going to go get in the pool, which is fun to me, and go take a walk. It's beautiful here in New York, so I'm grateful it's not too hot.
So you have an issue with eyesight. You were in a traumatic, got run over by a bus.
Yes, I did.
What else is on the list?
Type 1 diabetes for 50 years, an eating disorder, an addiction struggle, child of a raging codependent, relational, issues. And so it's, from an SGI Buddhist perspective, I'm like, okay, cool. I have all this crazy karma. I get to transform it. Yay, benefit. And I have to remind myself every day, like, this is all a benefit. So it's all about perspective, right?
How long have you practiced Buddhism?
I've been practicing SGI Buddhism. Actually, this past Sunday was 24 years.
So can you explain to me, what is SGI Buddhism? I'm not aware.
SGI is Nichiren Buddhism. The SGI stands for Soka Gakkai International, which means Value Creation Society. And it's based on the principles of the Lotus Sutra, chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which is the title of the Lotus Sutra. And what delineates it from the other 80,000 ideals of Buddhism is that it is the only practice that was written where we can become enlightened right now as we are. We don't have to go to our next life. We don't have to come back a man. We don't have to pay the priest. Right now we can become happy in our lives, transforming our karma. And the organization is a peace movement based on this practice. If we have culture and dialogue and education and the equality of all life, like, imagine that. There's no hierarchy, there's no priests, everyone's equal. We all have Buddhahood within us. So when we chant, we can bring that out, put you in what we call rhythm. It's like, when you exercise and you're feeling kind of blah, and then you feel better from the endorphin rush. That's how I analogize it, because you chant and the vibration of the sound of Kyo, of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, literally, if you chant for a little while, you're like, oh, I feel better. Like, it's vibration. We hear about this a lot. So it was designed for the happiness of all living beings, and is really an extraordinary effort to create peace and equality in the world. So we all have a respective mission. Whatever happens, quote unquote, to us is our mission to create value as you're doing. So hence the always like, thank you for what you're doing. In Buddhism, like, you got crushed by a bus. Congratulations, you're changing your karma. I'm like, oh, but it's kind of true.
So tell me about the book.
My book is Dance Because You Can, 5 Steps to Transform Trauma to Triumph. That was published August 14th of 2018 and basically walks you through, when I was, after my accident, my bus accident, my body had to be literally rebuilt, and there was obviously a lot of attention paid to that because there had to be, but there was really no playbook on how one rebuilds your life after something like that. As a dancer, everything I did in terms of my employment, my work, my life, my hobbies, my social was around moving my body, and I can no longer move in that capacity. So over time, I realized I sort of created this formula of DANCE, because I'm a dancer. Determination, acceptance, never give up, courage, and enthusiasm, which is a plug-and-play formula to really get through our challenges. So the book is a series of vignettes, stories of how I was able to use those principles to literally dance again in 2017.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And then there's a film.
There is a film. Woo! Amy's Victory Dance is on Amazon and Google and Apple and iTunes and YouTube and Tubi and pretty much everywhere else except for Netflix. And it was directed by Brian Thomas, who's an Emmy nominee and choreographer, Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston and Beyonce and Paula Abdul and Liza Minnelli, and this crazy resume. And he was a dancer. We were connected through the dance community. And when we met, he really wanted to do less commercial work and more truth-telling work. And one thing led to another. We were in production for my Victory Dance Project company performance, and we started filming my process of getting back onto the stage after my accident with the company. And he did a beautiful job of putting the pieces together and editing, and we made it out into the world.
Wow. So how long's that been out there?
The film was released May 13th of 2022.
Okay.
Despite the pandemic, and we had to hit the film festival circuit during the lockdown, so we had to do it all virtual. So there again, a host of obstacles, and everyone saying you'll never get distribution, you'll never get to Amazon, documentaries, don't this, don't that, but stay in your lane, right? And here we are. So I was disappointed because we didn't get to walk all the festival red carpets, but the movie got out anyway.
So what's your lane now going forward?
My lane now is really, I love working with young dancers, doing more teaching and choreographing pre-professional level, and also sharing on this idea of resilience and living your victory life. Like I said, we're all existing now in this consistent state of global trauma. It's everywhere, and we're so locked into our screens. And how can we be happy and create value and transform our lives and now, not at some later date. Have the things that we want despite what they're saying about the economy and this and that, and what actions do we need to take. And we can have these challenges and still be happy and productive and successful.
Yeah, what it makes me think about is the power of attention and the fact that we get to choose what we do with our attention.
Yes, attention, and that takes some work. There's this kind of, well, with the power of attention, it's a learned skill, and I feel like, I'm in New York right now, and I'm just watching people literally walking down the street, staring at their phone screens, and it makes me sad because we're so not engaged with our life. We're engaged with our phone, and there's so much out in the world, and it takes some effort now to really show up, because it's such an easy distraction, or we think it's so. I said to someone in the elevator here in my building a few weeks back, I go out in the morning for coffee. I don't take my phone. Who do I need to talk to at 7:30 in the morning? I know everyone in the neighborhood. There's a problem. I'm 2 blocks away. I know the shopkeepers. And she said, oh my God, I'm afraid I'm going to miss something. I said, are you really going to miss something? So I feel like the more distractions we have, the more we get to choose. We have to choose where our attention goes, because, there's, and then mentally, even with social media, I was getting caught up in it last night. I shut it down. I took it off. I deleted it. It's, I said, this is not creating any value. It's making me miserable. I'm starting to compare myself to what this one did and that one did. And I'm aware of it, So how do we stay focused and present and joyful and engage with each other, not our screens?
Well, I think a big part of it is finding a practice of putting the phone down for a period of time. Mm-hmm. I know one of the guys I interviewed a couple years ago, he calls when he wakes up in the morning his power hour. And he doesn't go near his phone for the first couple hours of the day, He journals and he gets connected to himself. Right? Because that's what eventually happens. We just kind of, it's almost like we go out of our bodies, like
we are out of our body. I mean, I see it every day on the street. I literally stop and I'm just waiting for the day where someone literally walks into me, because it troubles me with the youth, because we're losing the capacity to engage and have dialogue and the courage to speak face to face, and it's so easy to hide behind. So I think it's a good time to pay attention to this idea of the power of attention, and I have to do it too. And how important is it really? Do I have to get back to this person at 9:00 at night? No.
Yeah, well, it's created a need for boundaries.
Yes.
That didn't exist before,
Sure.
And it's like we make a conscious choice. Like I remember being in a work situation where someone had emailed me at like 10:00 at night, and they were responding to some random email that they got at 9:00 at night. And it's like, and I remember talking to somebody there, a superior of mine there, and saying, well, I mean, for me, like, I'm not working after work.
Right.
Now there's some circumstances, but if I have a job, if I have a 9 to 5, I learned I had to stop at 5, or if I stay an hour over, whatever, but when I'm not working, I'm not working.
Right.
And responding to emails is working, But we now have this culture where it's kind of expected that you, at least to some degree, are kind of on all the time. A lot of us.
It's contributing to this global state of trauma that we're in because we're always wired.
Yeah. But when I brought this up to him, about like, why is this guy, working this late at night? Because he's overworked anyway. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe he needs some parameters. And the response I got was, well, that's his choice. We all decide how we handle that. This is how he chooses to do it. It's not the same as how you choose to do it. And it's doesn't have to be good or bad, which I guess, but it's this whole thing, it's created an atmosphere where it's really easy to hide out. Mm-hmm. So there's anxiety where people didn't have anxiety before, and and one of the things about it that really stands out to me is how ugly people are on the internet. Oh. On social media. Like they just feel free to be hypercritical of whomever,
for just no other reason. And, and again, where's the attention? Like I caught myself in it last night and I was getting all wound up and all upset. And I just finally caught myself and shut it down. And so having experienced such a level of trauma makes me go, okay, do I want to stay in this? Or, I think it's part of what I'm teaching now of exactly that. Where is our attention? And I think it's contributing to, poor work habits. Every day I find myself dealing with mistakes that are being made because people are not paying attention to their jobs. I mean, when I had a job in an office, I got invited into the boss's office because I was spending too much time on personal calls, and you walk into CVS, even in medical communities lately with nurses on Instagram and prescriptions that were called in wrong because we're so distracted. And how do we come back to ourselves? And you don't have to get run over by a bus to do that, but it's an interesting phenomena right now that I'm becoming more and more curious about. Depending on how much I've chanted, I get frustrated. I'm like, get off your phone.
Yeah.
I literally write into my dancers' contracts when the company's in production, like, you are not to be on your phone. You will be docked pay. We are at tech rehearsal. Phones are to be put down because, we need this ability to focus and be intentional and attentive is an important life skill. And what happens then if someone has a traumatic situation? How are we going to build the capacity to deal with something like that? So I hope that I can share, how to learn to be more mindful and boundaried within these parameters.
One of the things, I was having a conversation with a young man recently about, you ever think about what happens if everything goes dark? And when we're back to analog everything? And, he was like 20 and had never even really considered it. Yeah. And I don't know, but I think that's because he never had to add and subtract and multiply and divide without access to a calculator.
Right.
Or
tell time.
Or, I wrote him a note and mailed it to him. And, he asked me, what did it say? I mean, what do you mean? What does it say? Like, you can read. He's like, yeah, but I wasn't taught to read cursive. They don't teach kids how to write and read cursive anymore.
Oh, that's horrifying.
That is crazy.
I still have handwritten notes, by the way. I love it.
Yeah, well, I sent him a book and I put a note in it, and, yeah, I was kind of stunned to learn that they're not teaching kids cursive anymore. Yeah. But like, I think about it, like, I mean, last night the internet was down in my house.
You didn't die.
No, I didn't die. It happened twice, at least, for a period of a couple hours. And the first time I was working on a website and I had to stop. I couldn't work. I mean, I couldn't work. And then I also had a Zoom call, which I ended up having, a meeting. Like, and I ended up taking a walk and turning off the Wi-Fi on my cell phone and using data. Mm-hmm. But, and then, I finished all that stuff, finished my day, and then kind of, had dinner and started to get into my evening routine and like couldn't watch the baseball game and,
right. We don't realize.
I guess I could just read.
I know. Read a book. Like, wow, what's that?
Which I feel better when I do. But like, yeah, we're so dependent on all this stuff. We really are. And I don't know. I can't help but think there's someday something's going to happen and we're going to need those skills.
Well, we've already, seen that in different situations, and this is part of why I want to be more involved with more young people, and especially as artists. And don't worry about your Instagram followers. Let's focus on our craft. Everything down to like how we treat the space and being respectful of each other. And what do we do when something happens and we get injured and we can't go on the path we had chosen? So how do we redirect and, let go of the resentment or work through that, or just to build capable people, which is also part of the goal of the SGI as a whole, capable youth. So I appreciate that I have that training in my life, especially now. It got me through, but where does that inner resolve come from if the only thing we're connected to is Instagram? So it's an interesting, I was thinking about this the other day with I was having a conversation about, about college, and of course the price is a whole other situation, but we won't get into. But the importance of that time from, 18, 19 to 23 to 25, and growing as a human and learning how to deal with conflict and problem solve and live on your own and, grow into yourself, and how we're getting away from that. And so I'm very inspired to work with more youth and kind of say, hey, like, let's get down into who we are and learn how to communicate and use our art, use our craft, and worry less about our followers. And
yeah, but on the other hand, it's real too. I mean, I've worked in the field of addiction treatment for many years and have sort of specialized in working with men post-treatment. Mm-hmm. And at some point, they're going to date. And they're likely to want to do it quickly, And
right.
And in this day and age, like, you need to probably going to need to use dating apps. You know, I mean,
know.
And so it's like, then the conversation becomes about who do you want to be? How do you want to be on dating apps? But how do you want to use that? And what are you using it for? Because sometimes it's just for attention, you know, but it's a tool. It's a tool that we have to learn how to use. And it's like, you know, Instagram, I mean, for at least the first year and a half of having this podcast, I found guests on Instagram. Mm-hmm. You know, that's how I met people. That's how I met Gina Moffa, you know, and it's a tool. It can be useful, you know?
Oh, it can definitely be a useful and cost-effective way for marketing and interaction. And at least in my world, so much of the conversations are now done through the DMs. And it's funny with the dating apps, that 54 and perpetually single, which has just been a lifelong challenge. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go on Match. And then I got on Match and I was like, oh, so now I'm even more determined to go find places I like to be out in the world and meet people. I'm like, people used to meet each other the old fashioned way, just going out, engaging in like things they like to do. Like, this has to still exist. Like, you know. Mm-hmm. Although I've met some interesting people, but yeah, how do we want to be online, and then how does that translate into how are we in the real world, and honing those skills. And everything has its pluses and minuses. So
yeah, you know, I work with men and you know, consider myself somewhat of a men's advocate. And so I follow these different accounts online, mostly on Instagram, and I write about, you know, men and emotional competency and stuff like that, or the need for it. And just how to be better men. Right. You know, that's kind of how it started for me, going through a divorce and who's the man I want to be. And I haven't shown up as the man who I really want to be. And you know, so like going down that path, and what I've found is like so much of the content out there, and even aside from social media, if it's a book for men on how to better himself, it's either about how to get laid, how to find Jesus, or how to make money. You know, and that's what they're all about, you know, mostly.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah. But, you know, one of the things I've done is, you know, I see all these crazy ass posts online about, you know, one the other day was, basically a guy saying, you know, if you treat her well, you should expect her to cheat. That's what he said. This is like a guy like giving dating advice. If you treat her well, and so much of it is like, dehumanizing, you know? I mean, I think the problems that guys have, a lot of us have with dating, is we're so fixated on what we want to get from somebody. Mm-hmm. We're not treating them like human beings, you know? And there's, anyway, cause I don't want to be the guy who makes, negative comments, and I don't want to engage in online arguments and stuff like that. Which, you know, those are just, there's one rabbit hole after another you can choose to go down if you want. Yeah. But one of the things I've done is to take some of these things I've seen and then write an essay about it. Mm-hmm. And debunk it. Yes. And take that and do something good with it. And really, part of the reason I follow these people is because I want to know what's out there. I want to know what guys are being told.
Yeah, I saw something recently. It was a Christian men's thing, and the guy had like 50,000 followers, and he was literally like, this is the point that men and women cannot be friends, and if you're married, you can't be friends with a woman that you spend time with, because and I, and as an SGI Buddhist, it's about, our karma, but also taking responsibility and not living by this bizarre set of rules and this life respect for the other human, So I'm so grateful that I've been indoctrinated in this ideology of just, and you see it every day, of just lack of dignity of life and just simple things. And I mean, that was just one example of just like, this is just far off, and can't have normal emotions, and we're so self-involved. But in a situation like, like you just mentioned, like, I'm very curious about this person's karmic history, because that's just, like you said, it's just no respect for the other person,
Well, and it does say a lot about the person when they say things like that.
Exactly. Can't be friends with a woman ever. It's going to destroy your marriage.
Well, one of the things that I've seen a lot is, there are these guys out there who are, tend to talk about Jesus, and they're saying, denounce hookup culture and just get married, right? And in my mind, I want to say, dude, there's like a whole world between those things.
Right.
Like you don't have to go from one polarity to the other.
And Jesus never said either of those things, because most of what he said, we don't really know, because he couldn't read or write, but we don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. So that's a whole other...
That's a whole other thing. But, this, again, how we're indoctrinated and the rules that were put around become this judgment, and it's horrifying.
Well, and again, it's a choice. We don't have to attach to them. That's the thing. And probably one of the best things that happened to me in terms of romance, was that I mourned the divorce, I mourned the marriage. And really, for me, it was the idea, the whole idea, the whole picture I had of how my life was going to play out. And that's what I was losing. Mm-hmm. But then also the next relationship I got in, which I kind of promised myself I'd never end up in another situation like the one before. And lo and behold, there I go. And I did it again. And, the agenda I always had was to find somebody to be with her forever. That's how I was operating. Mm-hmm. That's what I was pursuing. And then, after the divorce and then the next relationship ending, I started to ask myself, or think, maybe what God wants for me is to be in a sequence of 2-year relationships, sporadically throughout my life. Maybe I'm not meant to be married. Maybe, is that even really what I want? Or is that just what I was indoctrinated to believe I was supposed to do? And that's why I want it. So I really started to question all that stuff. And also to recognize that the love I was looking for in somebody else, I already had it.
Right.
Because the people who I was pursuing who weren't able to reciprocate, weren't able to receive, let alone reciprocate. Right. The love I had for them, it wasn't anything they gave me. I had it. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge realization for me.
Yes.
And then as time went on, I learned, what I got from do I even want to be married and all that stuff was I learned to go into, not only relationships, but interactions with people, all people, not even only people I wanted to date, without an agenda.
Right.
Just be curious. Just talk to her.
Be present.
Be present. Don't have a belief about or a expectation about where it's supposed to go. If it goes somewhere cool, be happy about it. And also a big part of it for me was recognizing that what most of us consider rejection, like if I approach a woman and what most of us would call rejection, it's not personal if she's not interested in me. She's not doing anything to me.
To you.
Right? It's just for whatever reason. And if you play it out, like, there's a reason why she's not interested, right? Like, and you're probably better off.
Well, that's right. That old adage, the recovery room's rejection is protection. So I think about that a lot.
I don't think I've ever heard that, but it's true.
Rejection is protection. This isn't meant to be. And then do we trust the process? And I see so much hiding behind this religious righteousness. It's amazing just to avoid the work.
Oh, yeah.
And the self work and the introspective work. It's so much easier to point fingers or just go to the spiritual house once a week and go eat after. And I'm like, again, from a Buddhist perspective, it's cause and effect. Thought, word, and deed. Everything I think, everything I say, everything I do is a cause and will render an effect. So how am I showing up in the world? And we're all human, make mistakes, have regrets, wish I hadn't done this that way. But the capacity to look at that, like you just said, and then take a step back and do the work around it is ultimately what will free us up to transform the trauma or take a different path or get past the pain. And I see people I know that just are stuck in these ideas from these rules.
Well, it's a spiritual bypass.
Yeah.
On a big scale, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
And no one can save us from ourselves. We have to do the work, and that's the amazing and challenging thing about this practice. So even in a situation like mine, like crushed, my mobility is limited. I haven't driven a car since 1992. Is it still annoying and, frustrating? Yes, but you learn to work around it. So this is how we become resilient. We take these challenges, the mobility challenges. I can't do what I did before. So what can I do now? It's going to look different. And that forces a person to look at a different lane. So again, it's a benefit from my spiritual perspective, never a victim of circumstance, and it's so easy to go down that road. Oh, well, she's the mother of my children, or I'm like, no, if you're not, like, stand up, set boundaries, have to be a little uncomfortable sometimes. So, this is how we evolve and, create victory. That's where we are. Let's create, but there's work involved with that. And every day, with diabetes, I have to take action. I have to eat right. I have to exercise. I have to rest. I have to, otherwise, that's sort of a black and white thing. Otherwise, just the blood sugar goes off the rails and I don't feel good and it's a hot mess. And so I am very proactive, and it's kind of a metaphor for life, right? Even if you don't have diabetes, like, what do I need to do to create the things I want for myself? And am I willing to do them, or I'm just going to throw up my hands and say, oh, this happened, poor me. And I go through that too, of course, but it passes.
So, looking back over the years, you know what's coming, don't you?
Yes, I do.
When was the time in your life where the younger Amy needed support the most? What was going on? And if you had the opportunity to go back and say something to her, what would you say?
There have been a few, major moments as I'm getting older. Obviously my diabetes diagnosis, which was not handled well, but it was a different time. It was 1973 and we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the information we have now. We didn't have the technologies we have now, but that little 4-year-old really needed some support, some education, and to not be sort of identified as sick, and just to say to her, you have a lot of capacity and you will succeed and it's going to be okay and you are competent and don't compare yourself to other people. And enjoy. You're allowed to enjoy your life, It's okay. Worthy of love. I try to be more affirming. This is my new thing. I'm trying to really positively affirm. I'm like, let's try that for a while because we know where the negative stuff goes. But it takes some attention. There we go. Back to that word, attention.
Yeah.
So I would, and then at the time of the accident, I think would be another time, although I was 40, I'm just sort of wrapping my arms around myself and it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And you will survive because you're tough as hell. And congratulations for that. I would congratulate myself more for my accomplishments, as we remarked earlier, and Janet said to me today, as opposed to always focusing. This is clearly still something that I'm working on, Oh, you've done a lot with your life. Congratulations, Amy. This is what I would encourage people to say to themselves. Congratulations for the wins today, Some days that was literally taking a shower and getting out for a coffee. Some days that was making a film, but it's all relative.
Well, thank you for everything you do.
You're welcome, and thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
I appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening to the show. Please subscribe, leave a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can learn more about my other podcasts by visiting thepathtooauthenticity.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. Music is by the band Punk Rock Opera, used under a Creative Commons license and with permission from the artist. The show is produced by me, Tom Gentry. You can find more of my work on Substack, including a podcast only available to paid subscribers. So again, thanks for listening. Keep coming back. Be nice.